Hey, look at that. I didn't even realize. Steve Darrow says, Common Sense Resistance Academy. What's in the curriculum? In TSL 36, in an answer to a question about classical music, you mentioned that you would have students be exposed to classical music in the Bill Whittle Academy. This prompted the thought, what would the entire curriculum be? That was a kind of a handy segue. I can just give you an idea. Education is not really my specialty, but for those of you that haven't heard it before, let me tell you what my schooling was like in Bermuda. When we went to school in Bermuda, public schools are actually considered, you had to pay for them. I went to two schools in Bermuda. First I went to a place called Warwick Academy, and then I went to Saltus Grammar School. And they're both the same, but I'll take Saltus. When you enroll into the school, they randomly divide each one of you into four groups. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And what those divisions are for is they put you in different houses. Houses are a really brilliant idea that I have not seen here, but it's everywhere in British schools. And for most of you, the only way you can connect to this is Harry Potter. I'm not a Harry Potter fan. I don't think I've seen 2 or 3 of the movies, tops. But for those of you who are familiar with Harry Potter, you know that in Hogwarts there are 4 different houses. What are they? Slytherin, Gryffindor, Ravensclaw, and Snugglepuff or something. You get the idea. But in Harry Potter, people are kind of assigned to the house based on their emotional spin. In British schools, it's completely random. And I always liked blue. I never got a blue. I was in a yellow house in Warwick Academy, a red house in Saltus. So what happens is you come in now and your entire school is divided up into quarters. And Saltus had a house called Patterson. They had a house called, one of the houses was called Saltus. There was another one called, anyway, doesn't matter. That means that the school is in competition all the time, academically and athletically. So once a year, at least once a year, probably a couple times a year, they would say, okay, here's the rankings in history. First was this person, then second, third, all the way down to the bottom for second form or third form or whatever. And then Saltus wins this round with this many points, and Patterson is second with this many, and so on. And so you're constantly in competition, and you're constantly striving to excel, and it really works. The discipline is very strict, but I was much safer feeling, felt far safer at a school where they would cane you than I did when I got to Dade County, Florida, and I was surrounded by, blacks and Cubans who've been fighting each other forever, and we're just these white kids from Key Biscayne got busted into these things, and it's like watching the lambs go down the chute. I mean, it was just horrific. And they're pulling switchblades and things like that. It's like, that's what happens when you don't have any discipline. But in terms of the curriculum, this is one thing I did want to say. Even looking back on it, it's just hard to believe. When I went to Saltus Grammar School in probably what would have been the equivalent of 3rd or 4th grade, here's what I was taking. Because they didn't have a daily schedule, they had a weekly schedule. Instead of the same classes every day, they'd have a certain arrangement of classes on a Monday, and then a certain one on Tuesday, and so on and so on. I was taking in 3rd or 4th grade, I guess, over here, I was taking physics, biology, chemistry, reading, history, Spanish, geography, wood shop, metal shop, physical education. That might be it. I think it was 11. There's one I'm missing. And so on Monday you'd have double history, then you'd have one class of Spanish, and then you'd have a recess, then you'd have double math. I forgot math. Double math, and then and then double phys ed or whatever, and then they just keep moving it around. So every week you got 11 subjects, and you didn't get science, you got biology, and then you got chemistry, and you got physics. Got them all at the same time. It's incredible. Ohio Coastie there says the same thing at the Service Academy. They're divided into companies, and that competition works the same way. I never really thought about that before, Ohio, but yes, it's the exact same thing. It works really well, because it keeps people on their toes and it gives you a measure of progress. So I would just say that the academy would be classically oriented, because history is the great reservoir of other people's mistakes. Flight instructors will say, You know, kid, you need to learn from the mistakes of others because you're not going to live long enough to make them all yourself. And that's exactly right. We study what people did wrong so we don't do it ourselves. And that's important. That requires a little bit of courage and discipline to look at errors and things. But these competitions were just great. So that's what the curriculum would look like. And as I said about history, history is the laboratory of human experience. The problems that we face are not fundamentally different than the problems that the Greeks faced, because people don't change. The biology, the cells, the matter doesn't change. The wiring is the same. The wiring changes over hundreds of thousands of years. There's only been civilization for 7,000 years, and there's only been, you know, really written civilization for a few hundred years in terms of the actual post-Renaissance and the Reformation and the Age of Enlightenment, all that stuff. So, you know, there it is. It's the kind of thing where you would just study what happened in the past as a way to get some insight into what's happening now, because if you study the sequence of things in the past, you can get a pretty good idea of where we are in that sequence and what comes next. See, the great thing about history, nobody gets this. History is the way to foretell the future. I read history because I want to tell the future. And the only way you can tell the future is to find out what are people going to do in this set of circumstances. And if you find out that people in this set of circumstances keep doing the same thing every time, you got a pretty good way of knowing what's going to happen next, which is why we run around with our hair on fire. Because all the signs we're seeing here are terrible signs. They're signs of a society that's on the brink of civilizational collapse. And now that you're all cheered up and ready to go to bed, that should make you all very happy. And classical music, by the way, just since that was in there, I got exposed to classical music through that genius Jack Horkheimer, who used in the Miami Planetarium. It wasn't just classical music. We had, obviously, planetarium shows are going to have classical music in it, but I mean, I was listening to, my first album was Brandenburg Concerto. It was the first album I bought. So we would get all the classical music. This entire 8-minute segment would be, with Sibelius, Swan of Tuonela, and we'd listen to, Boccherini's Minuet, and we just got all of it. But not only did Jack put the classical music into the show, when Jack would do a show, he was a musician. Jack Horkheimer was a keyboard artist. He used to be known as Jack Foley. And so when we did the show on Buck Rogers, we did a Mars show. We just got some, I guess it was one of the Mariners. It might have been Mariner 9. Yeah, I think it was Mariner 9. Sends back some new Mars images. So the planetarium needs to do a Mars show because, we got some new Mars pictures. So most people would have done, the red planet. Here's the probe. Now, Horkheimer was such a genius. His Mars show was called Buck Rogers Right On. And what he did with that show was he showed the difference between what they thought about Mars in the days of Buck Rogers versus what we think about Mars now. And the whole thing was done as a radio show. And I remember the very first note of this thing, and I remember the music. It took me a second to cross-reference it. It's the Flying Dutchman. It's bum 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 ba dum bum, then the voice of Buck Rogers comes on. All the cartoons are up there on the ceiling. So I got exposed in the walk-in period prior to the show, while people are walking into the planetarium. It's what we call the walk-in. He didn't have classical music or even 30s music. What he had all of the radio shows. So I got to listen to Alan's Alley. I got to listen to Jack Benny. I got to listen to all these guys. And then when he did a show on Child of the Universe, he talked about how the Nazis, the period between the wars, gave the birth of the Nazis, was such a nihilistic time. And so he played the music of Lotte Lenya and Kurt Weill in German. I'm listening to Kurt Weill's music sung by Lotte Lenya in German, probably recorded somewhere around 1932, somewhere in that ballpark, let's say. That's an actual education. It's an actual education. Okay, we got 2 to go, I think.